Hello everyone, how's it going? In this chapter, we'll be looking at personality. Imagine this. You're at a party and you meet some new friends. And soon, within minutes, you start forming impressions about their personalities. Are they outgoing or reserved? Are they optimistic or realistic? But do you think that we can really understand their personalities simply by talking to them? In this chapter, we'll be looking at some theories, perspectives, and methods to explore personality in order to better understand who we are. First, let's look at module introduction. In this module, first we will look at the definition of personality, and then we will focus on Freud, including defense mechanisms and the psychosexual stage theory. We will also be looking at Erikson's stage theory. And after that, we will talk about behavioral, social cognitive, humanistic, and trait perspectives to better understand personality. And after that, we will look at how to assess personality, including objective and projective tests. After you watch the video, please remember to take the Week 5 quiz to complete the module. Next, let's look at the objectives. So after watching this video, you will be able to define personality, and along the way, you will understand the different perspectives and theories to explain personality, including Freud's theory, Erikson's theory, and behavioral, social cognitive, humanistic, and trait perspectives. And you will be also able to explore different methods to assess personality, including objective and projective tests. So these are the objectives and the things that we're going to cover in this chapter. First, let's look at the definition of personality. What is personality? If I ask you, what is your personality? What would you say? You might say something like, maybe I am INTP from the MBTI. Do you know what that is? Well, MBTI is quite popular nowadays, especially among young people in many Asian countries. But is it the real personality? And what is personality? Let's look at the definition. Personality is the pattern of our behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that characterize us. So our personality is distinctive, that can differentiate us from the other people. Our personality is also relatively enduring. That is, we display our personality consistently across different situations. So that is our personality. Then how about personality traits? The traits are the consistent characteristics that influence our beliefs, our thinkings, and our behaviors. Then you might think that, okay, I'm outgoing, I'm friendly, or I'm shy, I'm ambitious. Those are the traits. And these traits can form our personality and influence who we are. So that is personality and the personality traits. Next, we're going to look at some theories and perspectives to understand personality. And we will start from Freud. Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Do you remember that? We've talked about this in the earlier chapters. So this theory focuses a lot on our unconscious. What is unconscious? Unconscious is the part that we are not aware of and we have no access to. Freud believed that our personality is the dynamic interplay of the unconscious forces, and we are not aware of those forces. So we put our unwanted thoughts, wishes, sexual and aggressive drives in our unconscious mind. In addition, Freud believed that our childhood experiences play an important role in shaping our personality. How we interacted with our parents in childhood can influence who we are today. Freud further believed that our personality can be divided into three structures, including id, ego, and superego. Let's look at them. So first, our id. Our id is our biological needs, so that's our immediate gratification. It operates on pleasure principle. Well, like a baby. Baby might say, oh, I want it now. If I don't get it, I will cry. That's our id, our biological needs, our urges. And if we look at the iceberg model, we can see that our id is deep in the ocean. It's unconscious. We're not aware of it. Then next, our ego. Our ego deals with the reality. So it's like a mediator to try to meet our needs and also the demands from the reality. So we can see that it operates on the reality principle. If we look at the iceberg model, we can see that the ego, a part of the ego, is above the surface. It deals with the reality, and it also has the connection with our id. The last part is our superego. Superego is our morality, is our conscience. So it tries to tell us what is right, what is wrong, and it tries to overwhelm us with the feelings of guilt and shame. And we can see that it operates on idealistic principle or moral principle. And if we look at the iceberg model, we can see that part of it is above the surface and part of it is below the surface. It has the connection with our id and our ego, so it's our morality. So here we can see that our id tries to gratify our urges immediately. They are our biological needs. And our ego deals with the reality. And then our superego checks with our morality. So for instance, in the morning, you're tired and you don't want to go to school. So that is from your id, your biological needs. You are so tired, you want to go back to sleep. But then your superego, your morality might tell you that you're a student, so you should not skip class. Or you've been working so hard to get into this school, so you should not skip class. That's from your superego. Then your ego will deal with the reality and make the decision. But sometimes there might be conflicts among our id, ego, and superego, and that could create anxiety. To protect ourselves from being overwhelmed, sometimes we may use defense mechanisms. That's a term proposed by Freud. So now let's look at the term. Defense mechanisms. What are the defense mechanisms? Defense mechanisms are the strategies that we use to protect ourselves from anxiety. So our ego can use the defense mechanism to protect us from being overwhelmed. And when we're using it, we're not aware of it. It operates at the unconscious level. And there are several types of defense mechanisms, and now we're going to look at them one by one. Now let's look at the different types of defense mechanisms, and I will try to provide some examples to help you better understand what they are. So let's start from the first one. The first defense mechanism is regression. Regression means that we behave like we were a kid. So it means reverting to the behaviors from the earlier life stages. For example, maybe you are on the train, going home to visit your parents, and it's been a while since you last saw them. And you're quite nervous because you know that your parents are going to ask you a lot of questions about your schoolwork, your romantic relationship. So you're quite nervous. And then you might start reading comic books, or you might grab a blanket with you, just like what you did as a child. That's called regression. Next, let's look at projection. Projection means that we attribute our unwanted thoughts and feelings to other people. For example, well, maybe you're in a relationship, but the relationship is not stable. So you're thinking about cheating on your boyfriend. However, you accuse your boyfriend of cheating on you. That is called projection, that we attribute our unwanted feelings and thoughts to the boyfriend. The next defense mechanism we're going to look at is displacement. Displacement means we redirect our emotions to a safer substitute target. For instance, maybe you did poorly on an exam, and then the teacher might say, oh, you should work harder next time. And you're kind of sad and angry, but you cannot do anything to the teacher. So then you transfer your anger to your younger siblings when you go home. That is called displacement. The next defense mechanism we're going to look at is reaction formation. That is, we act in exactly the opposite way to our unwanted thoughts and feelings. For example, maybe a couple did not want to have a kid, but they have a child accidentally. So they might resent the child unconsciously, but they spoil the child with a lot of gifts in reality. That is reaction formation. Or maybe you've been looking forward to hanging out with your friend, but then your friend forgot. Then you might say something like, well, that's okay, I don't care. Well, I didn't want to hang out anyway. That is reaction formation, that we act in exactly the opposite way. Then next, repression. Repression is another defense mechanism that we might use. If we have some difficult or painful experiences, then we may use this defense mechanism to put our memories into the unconscious part. So, for example, a victim of a traumatic event such as rape might not be able to recall the details of an attack. So that is repression. Then the next defense mechanism is rationalization. It means that we provide false but believable excuses for our unwanted thoughts or behaviors. For instance, someone cheated on the exam. Might say, oh, everyone else is cheating. That is rationalization. We provide the false but believable excuses for our behaviors. Next, let's look at denial. Denial means that we do not accept the reality. That's called denial. For instance, many people might use this defense mechanism after they experience the loss of the loved one in the family. They may deny the reality. The next defense mechanism we're going to look at is sublimation. Sublimation means that we substitute the unwanted behaviors or thoughts with the socially acceptable activities. That's called sublimation. For instance, maybe a little boy wants to get into the fight, but instead he plays violent video games. Or individuals with great hostility might become a hunter. That is called sublimation. And the last defense mechanism we're going to look at is identification. It means boost our self-esteem by forming the imaginary or real alliance. So for example, maybe I'm shy and I'm introverted, and there's a popular girl in school. So I have the same hairstyle and the same dress just like her. That's called identification. Try to boost my self-esteem by forming alliance with that girl. So these are the defense mechanisms proposed by Freud. And Freud believed that when there are conflicts surrounding our id, ego, and superego, we may use defense mechanisms to protect ourselves from anxiety. So now I hope you have a better understanding of the defense mechanisms. And now we're going to do an activity together to see if you are able to identify defense mechanisms. So let's start from the first one. Chris failed an exam, but he blames the teacher for poor teaching. So what do you think? What type of defense mechanism is it? We have talked about those different defense mechanisms. And the answer will be rationalization. That Chris tries to provide some false but believable excuses for his behavior. That's rationalization. How about number 2? Jennifer experienced trauma in childhood, but she has no memory of the event. What type of defense mechanism is it? In this case, it will be repression. So she does not want to recall the details of that. So she repressed the memories and put the memories in the unconscious part. That is repression. Let's look at question number 3, and I like this one. Your boss yells at you. You come home and yell at your spouse. Your spouse yells at your child. Your child goes out to the yard and yells at the dog. So what type of defense mechanism is it? It will be displacement. So that means that we redirect our emotions to a safer substitute target. That's displacement. Then the last one. Ken resents his co-workers, but he acts overly friendly towards them. The answer will be reaction formation. That is, we act in exactly the opposite way to our unacceptable feelings. That is called reaction formation. So now I hope you understand what defense mechanisms are. Next, we're going to look at Freud's psychosexual stage theory. Freud's psychosexual stage theory was based on his own childhood experiences and his years of interactions with his patients and case studies that included the patient's childhood memories. And he believed that our childhood experiences can influence our personality to a certain degree. So he proposed this psychosexual stage theory. Freud believed that there are 5 stages, and at each stage, we have an erogenous zone. So what are the erogenous zones? That means that at a certain stage, or some areas of the body will have the heightened sensitivity, and then we will be sensitive to sexual stimulation. That's called an erogenous zone. The erogenous zones can be our mouth, our anus, or the genitals. And the change in our erogenous zones means the start of another stage. And well, we will also have the fixation at the stages if our needs are not gratified. According to Freud, at each stage we have some needs, and if our needs are over-gratified or under-gratified, then we will have the fixation at the stage. And the fixation at the stage can influence our behaviors and thoughts and further influence our personality to shape who we are. So now we're going to look at those stages one by one. First, let's look at oral stage. It's from 0 to 1 year old. So now the erogenous zone is the mouth. Babies can gain gratification through the oral activities, such as sucking, swallowing, or putting the thumb in the mouth. And during this stage, if babies' needs are over-gratified or under-gratified, then they may have a fixation at the oral stage. As they get older, they may develop some personality traits. So for example, some individuals might have the oral receptive personality. For example, if they get older, they may reduce their attention by binge eating, drinking, or biting their nails. Then some people may develop the oral aggressive personality. These individuals may be hostile and verbally abusive to others. So those are the outcomes of fixation at the oral stage. Next, let's look at the anal stage. It's from 2 to 3 years old. So now the erogenous zone is the anus. During this time, parents try to teach children how to use toilet. So there might be some conflict surrounding toilet training. If children react to parents' harsh toilet training by withholding their bowel movement, then as they get older, they will develop the anal retentive personality. That is, when they get older, they will be stubborn, they want everything to be perfect and everything to be in order. On the other hand, if children react to their parents' harsh toilet training by having a bowel movement whenever and wherever they desire, then they will develop the anal explosive personality. This personality is associated with messy and careless. So those are the outcomes of the fixation at the anal stage. The third stage is called the phallic stage. It's from 4 to 5 years old. During this time, boys and girls will experience some processes. So boys will experience the adipose complex, while girls will experience the electron complex or the conflict. But what are they? Let's look at the boys first. During the phallic stage, boys will experience the adipose conflict. What is that? Well, at this time, boys will develop the sexual desires toward their moms. Then, they're afraid that their dads will notice that and will punish them, so they have the anxiety of castration. But then soon they will realize that they have to repress their sexual desires toward their moms, and eventually they will identify with their dads. So they will develop the masculine traits as a male in the society, and that is the adipose complex experienced by boys during the phallic stage. Then how about girls? Well, girls will go through the quite similar process as boys in the phallic stage. Girls experience electron complex. During this time, girls have the sexual desires toward their dads, and they realize that they don't have a penis, so they have the penis envy during this time. But then they will repress their sexual desires toward their dads, and they will identify with their moms. So they will develop some feminine traits as a female in the society. And that is the electron complex experienced by girls during the phallic stage. But do you agree with Freud? Well, when I was talking about electron complex or adipose complex, you might be like, what? And yes, a lot of researchers did not agree with Freud. They argued about that. They did not believe that everyone will experience that. And indeed, Freud's theory was quite controversial, but we should know that it's still influential in the field, and it's used by many psychologists today still. Then after the phallic stage, stage 4 is called latency period. It's from 6 to 12 years old. So now children have to repress their sexuality. So they will pursue some non-sex activities. They will pour their energy into schoolwork, sports, or same-sex friendship. That is the latency period. The last stage is called the genital stage. And now individuals enter puberty. They become adolescents. Now they develop the secondary sexual characteristics, and those changes kind of reawaken their sexual urges. Now people are not able to repress their sexuality, so they begin searching for marital mates with whom they can share intimacy, and that is the genital stage. So these are the 5 stages proposed by Freud. It's called the psychosexual stage theory. Next, let's look at Erikson's stage theory to better understand our personality. Erikson believed that there are different stages across a lifespan, and our personality develops through those stages. Each stage builds upon the previous one, and there are 8 stages across a lifespan. At each stage, there's a psychosocial crisis, and how we deal with the crisis can determine who we are. So the different outcomes can shape our personality. And that is the stage theory proposed by Erikson. So now let's take a look at those 8 stages. Stage 1 is called trust versus mistrust, and it's for babies during the first year of life. During this time, if babies' needs can be met by the parents, then they will develop the sense of trust. If parents can provide warmth and love and support to the babies, then their world will be trusting. However, if parents fail to provide the warmth and love and meet their babies' needs, then their babies will develop the sense of mistrust. So during this time, babies will have the question, is my world predictable and supportive? That is the stage 1. Then stage 2. The psychosocial crisis is autonomy versus shame and doubt, and it's for children around 2 to 3 years old. So now children learn language, and they're learning to take responsibilities for themselves. They're learning to use toilet and to dress themselves or feed themselves. So during this time, if parents encourage these behaviors, then children will have the sense of autonomy. But if they are not encouraged to do those behaviors on their own, then they will have the feeling of shame and doubt. So children during this time may have the question, can I do things myself, or should I always rely on my parents? Then stage 3 is called initiative versus guilt. It's for children around 4 to 6 years old. So now children need to learn how to get along with their family members. If they are able to get along well with their siblings and their parents, then the feeling of initiative and self-confidence will grow. However, if they only think of their own needs and desires, or if their initiative does not produce desired outcomes, then they will have the feeling of guilt. So they will have the question, am I good or bad? Stage 4. The psychosocial crisis is industry versus inferiority, and it's from 6 years old through puberty. So now children go to school, and they have to learn to interact with other people socially outside the bound of the family. And if they can do something and then they're praised for their accomplishments, then children will develop the sense of industry. However, if they think that they are not able to meet their parents' or teachers' expectations, then they will have the feeling of inferiority. So children at this age may have the question, am I competent or am I worth this? Stage 5 is the stage for adolescence, and the psychosocial crisis is identity versus role confusion. During this time, adolescents have a lot of questions. Who am I? Where am I going? What am I going to do? So they may try out different things to try to figure out who they are. They may experiment with different activities to try to fit into their peer groups, fit into the school, and fit into the society. That is stage 5 for adolescence. Then stage 6. The psychosocial crisis is intimacy versus isolation, and that's a stage for early adulthood. So now young people might have the question, should I form intimate relationship with others? Well, it could be formed through close friendships or through marriage. But if they cannot form those intimate relationships with others, then they will have the feeling of isolation. So they will have the question, should I share my life with another person, or should I live alone? Stage 7 is the stage for middle adulthood. The psychosocial crisis is generativity versus self-absorption. During this time, individuals might think, can I contribute to the society? Can I guide the next generation? If they can do that, they will have the feeling of generativity. But if they failed to guide the next generation, if they think that they cannot contribute to the community, then they will have the feeling of self-absorption. So they will have the question, will it produce something of real value? Then the last stage, stage 8, is the stage for late adults. Now they will have the feeling of integrity versus despair. Now they reflect on their lives. If they think that they have a successful life, then they will have the feeling of integrity. But if they think that they did not accomplish their life goals, then they will have the feeling of despair. So they will have the question, have I lived a full life? That is stage 8. So as you can see, these are the 8 stages, and Erikson believed that we have 8 stages across a lifespan. At each stage, there's a psychosocial crisis that we must deal with, and the outcomes of our choices can determine our personality. So that is Erikson's stage theory. In addition to Freud and Erikson, there are also some other perspectives that are important in the field of personality. So now we're going to look at behavioral and social cognitive perspectives. First, let's look at behavioral perspective. And here we have to talk about B.F. Skinner. Do you remember B.F. Skinner and his theory, reinforcement and punishment? We have talked about that in the learning chapter. So B.F. Skinner believed that we learn from the consequences of our behaviors. If we get some rewards, then we know that the behavior can be repeated. But if we are punished, then we know that, okay, we will not do that anymore in the future. And for our personality, it's the same. How we form our personality is the same as how we learn things. It's through reinforcement and punishment. If we do something, we show some traits, and then we get rewarded, then we know that we can continue showing that trait. That is how we form our personality from the behavioral perspective. Next, let's look at social cognitive perspective. And here we will talk about Bandura again. Bandura believed that we can learn the behavior by observing the models. The models can be anyone in the environment, and that's called observational learning. Do you remember the bubble doll study? Now we're going to talk more about this study. And right now, you can pause this video and watch the bubble doll study video clip to learn more about the study. So from the video, we can see that Bandura exposed the children to the aggressive adult models and non-aggressive adult models, and he observed children's behaviors. So here, let's look at the results. Bandura found that if children were exposed to aggressive adult models, they were more likely to show aggressive behaviors. So we can see the graph on the right. The left one is for girls, and the graph on the right is for boys. And we can see AM means aggressive model, NAM means non-aggressive model. And the red bars are the female models, the blue bars are the male models. We can see that for both girls and boys, if they were exposed to aggressive models, they showed more aggressive behaviors. And we can also see that boys were influenced more by the male aggressive models. So for the graph on the right, we can see that the blue bar is higher. So why? It might be because that boys might view the male models as the role models in their lives. And maybe the aggressive behaviors in males are more acceptable in the society. That's why boys were influenced more by the aggressive male models, and they show more aggressive behaviors after observing the behaviors of the models. So that is the bubble doll study conducted by Bandura. And that's the same for our personality. If we observe the traits of other people, the models in the environment, and we learn the traits and the behaviors, then that is how we form our personality. So that's another view to explain how we form and shape our personality. Now, let's look at another view, humanistic perspective to understand personality. Do you remember humanistic perspective? We have talked about that in the first module. Humanistic perspective is a perspective that focuses on our human potential. So researchers from this perspective may study self-awareness, our potential, our peak experiences, and the free will. They believe that we all have the potential to be the best we can be. We can all fulfill our full potential for personal growth. Do you remember Carl Rogers and Maslow? They are the leading psychologists in this perspective. And now we will focus on Maslow. Maslow proposed the hierarchy of needs. He believed that we have several needs and they're arranged in the pyramid. So it's in a hierarchy with the most basic needs at the bottom. And then we can work along the way to reach the top to reach self-actualization. So now we're going to take a closer look at the hierarchy of needs. Here we can see that our needs are arranged in the hierarchy, and it is shaped like a pyramid. Our most basic needs are at the bottom, and they are the physiological needs. We need water and food, so they are the most basic needs that we have. And after these needs are met, we will move on to the next level, which are the needs for safety and security. So now we need a place to live, so then we will feel safe. After these needs are satisfied, we will move on to the needs for belongingness and love. So now we want to feel that we belong to a group or belong to a family, belong to a community or the country, and we have the need for love. The next level will be the esteem needs. We have the needs for self-worth and self-esteem. Then we have the cognitive needs. We have the needs for knowledge. And after our cognitive needs are met, we will move on to aesthetic needs. These are the needs for beauty and for odor. So you might appreciate art. At the top, we have the need for self-actualization. So we all have that need to fulfill our full potential and to be the best we can be. And according to Maslow, we all have the potential to reach the top. So we will work from the most basic needs, from the physiological needs, along the way to the top to reach self-actualization. So that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs from the humanistic perspective. The last perspective we're going to look at is trait perspective. From this view, well, we can understand our personality by looking at our traits. So what are the traits? The traits are our characteristics that influence our thoughts, beliefs, and our behaviors. And we should know that a trait is different from a state. So for example, maybe you're going to have a psychology exam and you're anxious. But after the exam, you're not anxious anymore. That means that you have the anxious state. You're experiencing that anxiety as a state instead of a trait. But if you are anxious all the time, then you might have a trait of anxiety. So we should know that a trait is different from a state. And now researchers agree that there are 5 personality traits, and they are called the Big 5. That is ocean, O-C-E-A-N. O means openness. People with this trait might be curious, and they're willing to explore new environment and new experiences. Then C means conscientiousness. Conscientious people are organized. They're self-disciplined and they're punctual. They're dependable. Then E means extraversion. Extroverted people are outgoing, they're talkative, and they're sociable. And A means agreeableness. Agreeable people are trusting and they're cooperative. And the last one, N means neuroticism. Neurotic individuals are anxious, they're hostile, and they may show negative emotions easily. So those are the Big 5 traits from the trait perspective. Now we have learned different theories and perspectives to understand personality. Then you may ask, how do we measure our personality? So in the next section, we're going to look at personality assessment. What is personality assessment? It means that we systematically gather the information from the person, so then we can understand the person and predict the person's behavior. That's called personality assessment. And we can use different methods to assess our personality. But different methods might depend on the different perspectives. For instance, researchers from the trait perspectives might use survey. They might use questionnaire, provide the items to the participants, and ask them to take the survey to score how likely they will do the behavior to know their traits. But for researchers from the psychoanalytic perspective, they may not use scales. They may use some other methods to try to tap on our unconscious mind by gathering the information from your own words. So you can see that different perspectives might use different methods to assess personality. And the assessments can be divided into two main categories, including objective tests and projective tests. Now let's look at the objective tests. Objective tests are the standardized and structured assessments to measure our personality. So we may use survey or questionnaires. We have several questions from a bank of items to ask respondents to rate on a scale to report how likely they will do the behavior or how well they agree with the statement. And then the researchers can score their items, their responses, and know what type of person they are. So that is the objective test. And we should know that if we use the survey or questionnaires, that will be self-reports. That is, persons will report their own behaviors. Now let's look at an example of the objective test, MMPI. Have you ever heard of this before? It's called Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory, and it's probably the most widely used test. It has been translated into different languages around the world. So in this test, it measures not only our personality, but also abnormal personality, such as depression and schizophrenia. This test includes 10 clinical scales. And the question is like, I usually feel that life is worthwhile and interesting. And then respondents have to rate on a rating scale such as true, false, or cannot say. And then the researchers can score their responses and understand their personality or their abnormal personality. So that is the MMPI. It's the example of the objective test. In addition to objective tests, researchers also use projective tests to assess our personality. So next, let's look at projective tests. In addition to objective tests, researchers also use projective tests to understand our personality. Projective tests are the unstandardized assessments that can reveal our inner parts of our personality. And it is believed that it has its origin in psychoanalytic perspective, because we try to tap on the unconscious part to understand who we are. And we can see that it's an indirect method, because we do not give respondents the questionnaires or surveys. We might give them some ambiguous stimuli and try to understand their personality by the words that they say. So that is projective test is different from the objective tests. First, let's look at this graph. What might this be? What do you think? You might think that, well, it looks like a bat or a moth or some animals or butterfly. Well, there's no correct answers. And this graph is from the Rorschach ink blots. So the Rorschach ink blots consists of 10 ambiguous ink blots, and then the respondents have to describe what they see, like the graph down there that you can see on the screen. And it is believed that what you say is in your unconscious part. So then researchers can gain insight into your unconscious mind to understand your personality. That's the famous Rorschach ink blots. Or like this. So what do you think? Please tell a story from the picture. You might think that, okay, there are two women, a young woman and an old woman. Maybe the old woman is the stepmother. Maybe she's a witch and she's trying to poison the young woman. Well, this one is from the TAT, Thematic Perception Test. And so there are several pictures like this one that you can see on the screen. And then people are asked to create stories from the pictures. It is believed that what you say reveals your underlying motivations, your concerns, and the way you see the world. So then if we analyze the contents of what you say, we can understand your unconscious mind and we can understand your personality. So we can see that projective tests are very different from the objective tests, that they try to understand our personality by looking at our unconscious mind. Alright, so that is all for this chapter. In this module, we have talked about the definition of personality. We also looked at Freud's theory and Erikson's stage theory, and then we went over different perspectives such as behavioral, social cognitive, humanistic, and trait perspectives to understand personality. In addition, we also talk about how to assess our personality by using objective tests and projective tests. So now I hope you all have a better understanding of personality. Next, you can take the week 5 quiz. You will have 30 minutes to complete the quiz. And after you take the quiz, you can move on to the last module, and we will be talking about psychological disorders. That is all for this video, and thank you for watching.